In a small apartment on the outskirts of Madrid, where the morning sun filtered through thin curtains, lived a special little girl named Sofia. She had been blind since birth, but anyone who spent time with her quickly forgot this fact. Sofia moved through her world with a confidence that made others forget what she couldn't see. The apartment wasn't much. 3 rooms with peeling wallpaper and windows that rattled when the wind blew. But it was filled with love. Sofia's mother, Elena, worked at a local bakery bringing home bread that still carried the warmth of the oven. Her father, Carlos, worked at a factory during the day. But his real passion emerged in the evenings when he would tell Sofia stories about the world outside their neighborhood. "The sky today was the color of your mother's favorite blue dress," he would say, guiding Sofia's small hand to feel the fabric. "And the clouds looked like cotton balls scattered by a playful child." Sofia would smile, building images in her mind from her father's words and the textures beneath her fingertips. While other children her age learned about the world through picture books, Sofia learned through sounds, smells, and the endless descriptions her parents provided. One rainy Tuesday when Sofia was 7 years old, everything changed. Carlos came home later than usual, struggling to maneuver something large through their narrow doorway. The neighbors helped him carry it up 4 flights of stairs. "What is it, Papa?" Sofia asked, her head tilted toward the commotion. "It's a piano, little one," Carlos replied, out of breath. "The music school near my work was closing down. They were going to throw it away. Can you imagine? It needs some work, but I thought, maybe." Sofia approached carefully, her hands extended. When her fingertips touched the cool, smooth surface, she gasped. The piano was old and slightly out of tune, but to Sofia it was treasure. "Can I try it?" she whispered. Carlos guided her to the bench, and Sofia's small fingers found the keys. The first note she played rang through their tiny apartment like a bell announcing a new chapter in their lives. That night, Sofia couldn't sleep. The piano called to her. While her parents dreamed, she slipped out of bed and found her way to the instrument. Without any instruction, she began pressing keys, listening intently to each sound, memorizing which key produced which note. By morning, she had taught herself to play a simple melody she had heard on the radio. "Sofia, how did you learn that?" her mother asked, amazed at the sound that woke her. Sofia just shrugged. "I listened, Mama, and then my fingers remembered." Word of the blind girl with the remarkable ear spread through their building, then throughout the neighborhood. An elderly woman from the 3rd floor who had once been a music teacher offered to give Sofia lessons for free. But she soon discovered that traditional teaching methods wouldn't work. "She doesn't need sheet music," the teacher explained to Elena and Carlos. "Sofia can hear a piece once and play it back nearly perfectly. I've never seen anything like it." As months passed, Sofia's talent grew. Her fingers danced across the keys with increasing confidence. The piano became her window to a world of expression that transcended sight. While other children played in the courtyard below, Sofia explored Bach and Mozart, Chopin and Debussy. Not everyone understood. Some parents whispered that it was a waste of time, that a blind girl would never become a real musician. Some kids from the neighborhood would knock on their door, asking if the blind girl could come out to play, only to run away laughing when Sofia appeared. These moments stung, but Sofia found her refuge in music. By the time she turned 12, Sofia could play pieces that conservatory students struggled with. Her teacher, now more a mentor than an instructor, began recording Sofia's playing on an old cassette recorder. "What are you doing that for?" Sofia asked one day. "Because someday people will want to know how you sounded when you were just beginning," the teacher replied. Sofia laughed. "Beginning? I've been playing for 5 years. For someone like you, Sofia, this is just the opening note of your song." Life wasn't always harmonious. Money was often tight in the household. Carlos lost his factory job during an economic downturn, and for several months the family survived on Elena's bakery wages and the odd jobs Carlos could find. During this time, Sofia overheard her parents discussing whether they could afford to keep the piano. "We could get good money for it," Carlos whispered late one night when they thought Sofia was asleep. "That piano is her eyes, Carlos," Elena replied firmly. "We'll sell everything else first. They never did sell the piano." Instead, Carlos started taking Sofia to play in the plaza on weekends. He would set up a small sign explaining that she was blind and played by ear. At first, Sofia was terrified. But the sound of coins dropping into the hat and the applause that followed her performances gave her a newfound confidence. A local restaurant owner, moved by her talent, offered Sophia a regular weekend spot in his establishment. The pay wasn't much, but it helped the family stay afloat. More importantly, it gave Sophia her first taste of performing for an audience who came specifically to hear her play. When Sophia turned 15, a visitor to the restaurant changed everything. Professor Ana Torres from the Madrid Conservatory of Music happened to dine there one evening. She sat through Sophia's entire 2-hour performance, watching the blind teenager navigate complex pieces without a single sheet of music in front of her. After the performance, she approached Carlos. "Your daughter has a gift that comes along perhaps once in a generation," Professor Torres said. "Has she had formal training?" Carlos explained their circumstances: the neighborhood teacher, the second-hand piano, the hours Sophia spent teaching herself. "Remarkable," the professor murmured. "With proper guidance, she could be extraordinary." Professor Torres offered to give Sophia weekly lessons at no cost. At first, Sophia was intimidated. The professor was strict and demanded a precision Sophia hadn't needed before. But soon, Sophia began to understand the difference between playing with natural talent and playing with trained technique. "Feel the music in your fingertips," Professor Torres would say. "Don't just play the notes, tell the story hidden between them." Sophia blossomed under this guidance. Her natural ability, combined with technical training, produced music that moved listeners to tears. Professor Torres introduced Sophia to composers she had never encountered before, and helped her develop her own unique interpretations. "You have an advantage," the professor told her one day. "Most students are slaves to the sheet music. They see the notes and play exactly what's written. You listen with your heart and find things in the music that others miss." Not everyone at the conservatory welcomed Sophia. Some students, jealous of her talent and the special attention she received, made snide remarks within her hearing. "She's only here because they feel sorry for her," one girl whispered. "The blind charity case," another called her. Sophia pretended not to hear, but each barb left a mark. On particularly difficult days, she would retreat to a practice room and lose herself in Beethoven's sonatas, finding kinship with a composer who created his greatest works after losing his hearing. By the time she turned 17, Sophia had developed a small but devoted following. Videos of her performances at conservatory recitals, recorded on phones and shared online, gathered thousands of views. People were captivated not just by her story, but by the emotional depth of her playing. "She plays as if she can see into your soul," one comment read. It was Professor Torres who first mentioned the International Piano Festival, an event that drew talented young pianists from around the world. The highlight was a masterclass with the legendary Anton Volkov, known for his brilliant technique and brutal honesty. "You should apply." "Sophia," Professor Torres suggested. Sophia's stomach tightened with anxiety. "He'll eat me alive." "Everyone says he's merciless, perhaps," the professor agreed. "But you have something many technically perfect pianists lack. You play with authentic emotion. And that, my dear, is something that cannot be taught." Without telling Sophia, Professor Torres submitted a video of her playing Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor. The professor knew it was a risk. Volkov was notorious for his disdain for what he called sympathy stories. But she also knew that Sophia's talent spoke for itself. When the acceptance letter arrived, the entire family celebrated. Carlos and Elena saved every penny for weeks to afford the train tickets to Barcelona, where the festival would be held. Sophia practiced until her fingers ached, determined to prove she belonged on that stage. The night before they left, Sophia sat alone at her piano in the quiet apartment. Her fingers trembled slightly as they rested on the keys. The journey from that salvaged piano to the international stage seemed impossible. Yet here she was, on the threshold of a dream she hadn't dared to imagine. Sophia took a deep breath and began to play, soft and low, a melody of her own creation, one that spoke of darkness and light, of struggle and persistence, of a little blind girl who found her voice through music. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, perhaps even humiliation at the hands of the famous pianist. But tonight, in the gentle embrace of her faithful piano, Sophia was exactly where she belonged. Little did she know that her encounter with Anton Volkov would change not just her life, but his as well. The train journey to Barcelona felt like crossing into another world for Sofia. She sat by the window, her fingers tapping out phantom melodies on her knees as the countryside rushed by. Beside her, her mother Elena described the changing landscape, rolling hills giving way to distant mountains, small villages scattered like fallen coins across the plains. "Are you nervous?" Elena asked, noticing Sofia's restless hands. Terrified, Sofia admitted, "What if I don't belong there? What if they laugh at me?" Carlos, seated across from them, reached over to squeeze his daughter's hand. "They might laugh, they might not. But you'll play, and that's all that matters." Barcelona's busy streets overwhelmed Sofia's senses. Car horns, street performers, conversations in multiple languages, the smell of salt air mixing with cooking food from roadside stalls. The family checked into a modest pension 6 blocks from the concert hall, the cheapest accommodation they could find. That evening, Sofia insisted on visiting the venue. "I need to feel the space," she explained. The Palau de la Música was nearly empty when they arrived. A kind security guard, moved by Sofia's story, allowed them a brief tour. Sofia counted the steps from the entrance to the stage, memorizing the layout. When she reached the grand piano waiting center stage, she gasped. "May I?" she asked the guard. "Just for a minute," he replied, looking nervously over his shoulder. Sofia's fingers skimmed across the keys without pressing down, feeling the cool ivory beneath her fingertips. This Steinway was worlds away from her weathered upright at home. The guard watched, curious as this blind girl moved her hands reverently across the instrument as if greeting an old friend. "Tomorrow," she whispered to the piano. "Tomorrow we'll meet properly." That night, Sofia barely slept. In her dreams, she played for crowds that either erupted in thunderous applause or cruel laughter. By morning, dark circles shadowed her eyes, but a determined set to her jaw showed she was ready. Registration began early. Dozens of young pianists from around the world lined up, many accompanied by private instructors and hovering parents. Most carried folders of sheet music. Sofia, with her white cane and without any papers, drew curious glances. "Name?" asked the woman at the registration desk. "Sofia Mendez." The woman scanned her list. "Ah, yes, the special entry." She didn't quite manage to hide her skepticism. "You're scheduled for the 3 o'clock masterclass with Maestro Volkov. Don't be late. He detests tardiness." Throughout the morning, Sofia and her parents attended performances by other pianists. The talent was intimidating. Young prodigies who had studied at elite conservatories since they were toddlers, who had played with orchestras and won international competitions. "They're all so good," Sofia whispered to her father. "Different, not better," Carlos corrected. "Listen closely." Sofia did, and gradually she began to hear what her father meant. Many played with technical perfection, hitting every note exactly as written. But something was missing, that ineffable quality that turned notes into emotion. Lunch was a quiet affair. Elena had packed sandwiches to save money, and they ate in a small park near the concert hall. Sofia barely touched her food. "You should eat," her mother urged. "You need your strength." "I can't," Sofia replied. "My stomach feels like it's full of butterflies." As 3 o'clock approached, they returned to the Palau. The audience for the masterclass was larger than the morning sessions. Volkov's reputation drew crowds eager to witness his brutal critiques as much as his musical insights. Backstage, Sofia waited with 4 other young pianists selected for the masterclass. None spoke to her. Whether from competition nerves or discomfort with her disability, they kept their distance, huddling over their sheet music and whispering among themselves. A harried-looking assistant appeared. "Maestro Volkov will see you in the following order," he announced, reading from a clipboard. Sofia was scheduled last. The first student, a boy from Germany, played Liszt with impressive technical skill. Volkov's critique was pointed but fair, focusing on interpretation rather than technique. The second and third students received similar treatment, respect tempered with high expectations. The fourth student, a girl from Japan, made a minor mistake during her piece. Volkov stopped her immediately. "Again from the beginning," he commanded. "And this time remember that Chopin was a poet, not a mathematician. You play as if you're solving an equation." By the time Sofia's turn arrived, the atmosphere in the hall was tense. She could hear the audience shifting in their seats, perhaps tired after nearly 2 hours of masterclass, perhaps curious about the blind girl who dared to enter this rarefied world. The assistant led Sofia to the stage. "Maestro Volkov, our final student today is Sofia Mendez from Spain," he announced. Sofia felt the weight of silence as she tapped her way across the stage to the piano. She heard a few whispers, a muffled laugh from somewhere in the back rows. Her cheeks burned, but she kept her head high. As she settled onto the bench, a deep voice cut through the quiet. "I don't see any music," Volkov said. His Russian accent made the words sound even more cutting. "I play from memory, sir," Sofia replied, her voice smaller than she'd intended. "All of it? What will you play for us today?" "Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9, No. 2. A ripple of reaction moved through the audience. It was a piece many considered overplayed, safe. Sofia heard Volkov's dismissive exhale. "Very well, proceed." Sofia took a deep breath, placed her hands on the keys, and began to play. The familiar piece flowed from her fingers, the melody singing out clear and true. She lost herself in the music, forgetting momentarily where she was and who was listening. 30 seconds in, Volkov's voice sliced through her concentration. "Stop!" Sofia's hands froze above the keys. "Your tempo is inconsistent," Volkov said. "Begin again, and this time count." Flustered, Sofia started over. This time, she'd barely played 10 notes when Volkov interrupted again. "Your posture is terrible. Sit up straight. Your wrists are too low. Who taught you to play like this?" Sofia adjusted her position and began a third time, her confidence crumbling with each note. This time, Volkov let her play for nearly a minute before stopping her. "Enough," he said. His voice had changed, growing colder. "Miss Mendez, do you know why this piece is considered one of Chopin's most beautiful works?" "Because of its emotion," Sofia ventured. "Because of its simplicity that masks complexity," Volkov corrected. "You play it like a music box, mechanically, without understanding. Your technique is elementary. You hit the keys like you're afraid they might break." The audience went silent. Even those who had come expecting Volkov's infamous criticism seemed uncomfortable with his harshness toward the blind girl. Sofia began. But Volkov wasn't finished. "Being blind may have earned you sympathy from your teachers and the selection committee, but it won't earn you respect in the music world. Some people simply aren't meant for the stage. You waste our time with mediocrity." The words struck Sofia like physical blows. Tears welled in her sightless eyes, and she blinked rapidly to hold them back. In the audience, she heard her mother's sharp intake of breath, her father's chair scraping as he half rose, only to be pulled back down by Elena. For several seconds, Sofia sat frozen, humiliation washing over her in waves. She should leave, she knew. Thank the maestro for his time and exit with whatever dignity she could salvage. That's what the other students would have done, but Sofia Mendez wasn't like the other students. She wiped her tears with the back of her hand and turned her face toward where she knew Volkov stood. "Maestro," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "would you permit me to play one more piece? Something of my own?" The audience murmured in surprise. Volkov himself seemed taken aback by her audacity. "Your own composition?" he asked, skepticism dripping from each word. "You think that will improve matters?" "I don't know," Sofia answered honestly. "But I'd like to try." A long pause followed. Sofia imagined Volkov staring at her, weighing whether to grant this unusual request or dismiss her outright. 3 minutes, he finally said. Not a second more. "Consider it a courtesy." Sofia nodded and repositioned her hands on the keyboard. She took a deep breath, pushing away thoughts of the audience, of Volkov's scorn, of her parents' worry. Instead, she thought of their small apartment in Madrid, of the piano her father had rescued, of nights spent discovering music on her own. And then she began to play. The piece started softly, hesitantly, like someone finding their way through darkness with outstretched hands. Simple notes in the higher register, childlike and questioning. Then gradually, the left hand entered with deeper tones, building a foundation. The melody grew more complex, incorporating elements of Spanish folk music and classical structure in a way that was neither one nor the other, but something entirely new. As Sofia played, the whispers in the audience died away. The piece built toward something unexpected. Not a traditional climax of crashing chords, but a passage of such delicate beauty that it seemed to suspend time. Her fingers moved across the keys with absolute certainty now, painting sound pictures of struggle and resilience, of darkness pierced by shafts of light. In the audience, Elena gripped Carlos's hand so tightly her knuckles went white. On stage, Sophia played with her whole body, swaying slightly with the music, her face reflecting every emotion in the piece. And somewhere in the hall, Anton Volkov stood absolutely still, his expression unreadable as he listened to music unlike anything he'd heard before. As Sophia's 3 minutes neared their end, she brought the piece to a close, not with a triumphant flourish but with a questioning phrase, a musical ellipsis that seemed to ask, "What happens next?" The final note hung in the air, resonating through the hall. Then silence. Complete, absolute silence. Sophia sat motionless at the piano, her hands now resting in her lap, her heart pounding. Had she made a terrible mistake? Had her composition been as amateurish as Volkov claimed her technique was? The silence stretched on for 5 seconds. 10, 15, and then, from somewhere in the back of the hall, someone began to clap. The single pair of hands clapping in the back of the hall was soon joined by another, then another, until applause thundered through the Palau de la Música. Sophia sat perfectly still at the piano bench, her unseeing eyes wide with surprise. The audience rose to their feet, the sound of their standing ovation washing over her like a wave. In the front row, Elena sobbed openly while Carlos beamed with pride, his own eyes glistening. The other young pianists who had performed earlier watched from the wings, their faces a mixture of awe and disbelief. But Sophia heard none of this. Her attention was focused entirely on the silence directly in front of her, the space where Anton Volkov stood. The famous pianist had not joined the applause. He remained motionless, his arms crossed over his chest, his expression unreadable to everyone but himself. Inside, Volkov was experiencing something he hadn't felt in years, genuine surprise. The applause continued until the festival director stepped onto the stage and raised his hands for quiet. "Thank you, Miss Mendez," he said warmly. "That was unexpected." Sophia nodded slightly, still waiting for Volkov's response. The hall fell silent again, everyone watching the maestro. Volkov cleared his throat. "You compose by ear?" he asked, his voice lacking its earlier scorn. "Yes," Sophia replied. "I've never written it down." "Impossible," Volkov muttered, but without conviction. He stepped closer to the piano. "Play the middle section again, the part with the changing time signatures." Sophia's fingers returned to the keys, finding the passage he requested. The melody flowed from a gentle 3/4 waltz into a more complex 5/8 rhythm that gave the piece its distinctive pulse. She played it through once, then without being asked, played it again with subtle variations. "You're improvising now," Volkov observed. "A little," Sophia admitted. "The piece is never exactly the same twice." Volkov made a sound that might have been a laugh or a scoff. "That's not how classical composition works." "It's how mine works," Sophia said simply. An uncomfortable silence fell over the hall. No student had ever challenged the great Anton Volkov before. The audience held their collective breath, waiting for his eruption. Instead, Volkov turned to address the crowd. "This concludes today's masterclass," he announced abruptly. "Thank you for your attention." With that, he strode from the stage, leaving Sophia still seated at the piano. The audience buzzed with confused chatter as the festival director hurried after Volkov. Sophia finally stood, unfolding her white cane, unsure whether she had triumphed or failed spectacularly. Backstage, her parents engulfed her in hugs. "You were magnificent," Carlos whispered in her ear. "He hated it," Sophia said, her voice small. "He didn't even say goodbye." "That man wouldn't recognize true artistry if it slapped him in the face," Elena declared fiercely, though she kept her voice low enough that only her family could hear. As they gathered Sophia's few belongings, preparing to leave, the backstage area filled with festival participants and audience members, trying to meet the mysterious blind pianist. People pressed business cards into Carlos's hands. A woman who identified herself as a journalist asked for an interview. A conservatory teacher from Paris offered Sophia a scholarship on the spot. Overwhelmed, Sophia clung to her mother's arm, trying to process what was happening. The day that had begun with such anxiety was ending in a whirlwind of attention she never expected and wasn't sure she wanted. "Please," she finally said, loudly enough to quiet the crowd around her. "Thank you all, but I need some air." The family made their way out of the concert hall, Carlos firmly but politely declining further questions and offers. Outside, the late afternoon sun warmed Sophia's face as she took deep breaths of fresh air. "What just happened in there?" she asked her parents, still dazed. Before either could answer, a voice spoke from behind them. "What happened is that you showed up unprepared, technically deficient, and without proper training, and still managed to silence every critic in the room, including me." They turned to find Anton Volkov standing a few feet away. Up close, he looked older than his 50 years. Deep lines etched around his mouth and eyes from decades of frowning at piano students. "Maestro Volkov," Sophia said, straightening her posture instinctively. "Your piece has structural problems," he continued, as if analyzing a student exercise. "The development section meanders. The counterpoint is occasionally amateurish. You rely too heavily on the pedal to mask technical limitations." Carlos stepped forward, ready to defend his daughter, but Sophia squeezed his arm to stop him. "Yes," she agreed quietly. "I know." This response seemed to catch Volkov off guard. "You know? I've never had proper training in composition. I just play what I hear in my head." Volkov sighed heavily. "That's the problem with raw talent. It needs discipline to become something lasting." He paused, then added grudgingly, "But what you played today, there was something in it." Coming from Anton Volkov, this qualified as effusive praise. Sophia felt a small smile tugging at her lips. "The festival continues for 3 more days," Volkov said. "There's a reception tonight at the Hotel Majestic. Important people will be there. Conservatory directors, patrons, concert promoters." He hesitated, then added gruffly, "You should come." Before Sophia could respond, the maestro handed a card to Carlos. "My private number. If she decides to attend, call first. I'll arrange for her name to be added to the guest list." With that, he turned and walked away, his posture rigid, his steps quick and precise. "Did that just happen?" Elena asked, disbelief coloring her voice. Carlos stared at the business card in his hand. "I think Anton Volkov just offered your daughter a chance." Back at their modest pension, Sophia sat on the edge of her bed, trying to process the day's events. From humiliation to standing ovation, to a personal invitation from Volkov. It seemed impossible that all had occurred in the span of a few hours. "Should I go to the reception?" she asked her parents. "What would I even wear? I don't belong in places like the Hotel Majestic." "Of course you should go," Elena said firmly. As for what to wear, she rummaged through their suitcase and pulled out the one nice dress they had packed, a simple dark blue dress Sophia had worn for conservatory recitals in Madrid. "This will be perfect," Elena declared, elegant and understated. "But all those important people, what will I say to them?" Sophia's fingers nervously twisted the fabric of her dress. Carlos sat beside his daughter. "You'll say exactly what you've always said, the truth. That you play because music is how you see the world. The rest will take care of itself." While Elena pressed the dress with the pension's ancient iron, Sophia took a quick shower. As the water ran over her face, she allowed herself a moment of pure joy. For the first time, people had heard her music, really heard it, and found something worthwhile. Whatever happened next, no one could take that away from her. When they arrived at the Hotel Majestic that evening, Sophia's stomach was once again filled with butterflies. The doorman's polite greeting, the whisper of expensive fabrics as people brushed past, the subtle sense of perfume and cologne. Everything announced that this was a world apart from her humble neighborhood in Madrid. After Carlos called Volkov's number, they were ushered into a grand ballroom where the reception was already underway. Conversations hushed briefly as heads turned to observe the newcomers, then resumed with increased intensity. "He's coming toward us," Elena whispered to Sophia. "Volkov." The maestro approached, accompanied by an older woman whose silk dress rustled expensively as she walked. "Miss Mendez," Volkov said by way of greeting. "This is Madame Rousseau, director of the Paris Conservatory of Music." "A pleasure, my dear," Madame Rousseau said, her French accent pronounced but her Spanish fluent. "Your performance today has been the talk of the festival. Everyone is asking about the blind girl who silenced Anton with her playing, a feat many have attempted but none have achieved until now." Sophia blushed, unsure how to respond to such a statement with Volkov standing right there. "I have embarrassed her," Madame Rousseau observed with a light laugh. "Come, let me introduce you to some people who are very eager to meet you." What followed was a blur of introductions. each more intimidating than the last. Concert promoters who wanted to know if she had a manager, recording industry executives interested in fresh classical talent with a compelling story, conservatory directors offering scholarships, master classes, private instruction. Through it all, Sophia maintained her composure, answering questions honestly, neither downplaying her abilities nor exaggerating them. When asked about her composition, she explained simply that she created music the way other people told stories to make sense of the world around her. "But surely you've studied composition formally," insisted one skeptical conservatory professor. "No, sir," Sophia replied. "I've never had the opportunity." "Impossible," the man declared. "No one simply intuits counterpoint and harmonic progression." "Perhaps most don't," came Volkov's voice from nearby. He had been circulating through the reception but keeping Sophia within earshot. "But then most pianists require sheet music. Miss Mendez plays Chopin, Rachmaninoff, and Debussy from memory after hearing recordings. Her technique requires refinement, but her ear is exceptional." Coming from Volkov, this was extraordinary praise. The professor looked chastened, and those gathered around Sophia regarded her with renewed interest. As the evening progressed, Sophia found herself drawn into a conversation with a young conductor from Germany who spoke with genuine enthusiasm about her composition. "The way you blend traditional Spanish influences with classical structure reminds me of De Falla, but with a modern sensibility," he said. "Have you written other pieces?" "Many," Sophia admitted, "but only in my head. I've never had a way to write them down." "That can be remedied," said a new voice. Madame Rousseau had rejoined their circle. "With proper training, you could learn to dictate your compositions. Many great composers throughout history have worked this way." "You truly believe I could be a composer?" Sophia asked, her voice betraying her doubt. "My dear," Madame Rousseau said gently, "you already are one. The question is whether you will become a great one." She touched Sophia's arm lightly. "I have spoken with Maestro Volkov. If you are willing, we would like to offer you a place in a special program, dividing your time between Madrid and Paris, with Volkov providing piano instruction and our composition faculty helping you develop your gift." Sophia stood speechless, overwhelmed by the opportunity being presented. I would need to discuss this with my parents," she finally managed. "Of course," Madame Rousseau agreed, "but do not take too long. Opportunities, like inspiration, sometimes come only once." As the evening drew to a close, Carlos and Elena found their daughter sitting alone at a small table, her expression thoughtful. "Ready to go, sweetheart?" Elena asked. "I think so," Sophia replied. "It's been quite a day." As they made their way toward the exit, Anton Volkov intercepted them one last time. "You surprised me today, Miss Mendez," he said without preamble. "That happens rarely." Sophia nodded, unsure what to say. "Consider Madame Rousseau's offer carefully," Volkov continued. "Your talent is real but unrefined, like a diamond that needs cutting to reveal its true brilliance." He paused, then added, "I am not an easy teacher. I will expect more from you than from others, not less." "Because I'm blind?" Sophia asked. "Because you have something worth saying through music," Volkov replied. "That is far rarer than technical skill." With that, he gave a curt nod to her parents and walked away. Outside the hotel, Sophia took a deep breath of the night air, her mind spinning with possibilities that hadn't existed just 12 hours earlier. "What are you thinking?" Carlos asked his daughter as they waited for a taxi. Sophia turned her face up toward the night sky she couldn't see but could somehow sense, vast and full of possibility. "I'm thinking," she said slowly, "that sometimes the most important notes in music are the ones that follow a long silence." The return to Madrid felt like waking from a dream. Sophia, Carlos, and Elena stepped off the train into the familiar sounds and smells of their home city. Yet everything seemed somehow different. The same street musicians played in the plaza. The same vendors called out their wares. But Sophia moved through it all with a new awareness, as if Barcelona had rewired something inside her. "It's strange," she said to her parents as they walked the final blocks to their apartment building. "Nothing here has changed, but I feel like I've been away for years instead of days." "You have changed," Carlos replied simply. "And when you change, the whole world looks different." Their apartment welcomed them with its familiar creaks and smells. Sophia went straight to her piano, running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. After the magnificent Steinway at the Palau, her old upright felt smaller, its action stiffer. Yet this was the instrument that had taught her everything she knew. "Hello, old friend," she whispered. The next morning, Sophia woke to the sound of voices in the living room. She recognized her mother's and father's, but there was a third, Professor Torres from the Madrid Conservatory. Curious, Sophia dressed quickly and made her way to join them. "Here she is," Elena said as Sophia entered the room. "We were just talking about you." "Good morning, Sophia," Professor Torres greeted her warmly. "I've been hearing remarkable things about your performance in Barcelona." "News travels fast," Sophia observed. "In the music world, it flies," the professor replied. "Especially when it involves Anton Volkov showing actual human emotion." They all laughed, releasing some of the tension that had filled the small apartment. Professor Torres had brought pastries, and they sat around the tiny kitchen table as she explained her visit. "Madame Rousseau called me last night," she said. "She outlined her proposal for your joint education between Madrid and Paris. You know her?" Sophia asked, surprised. "The classical music community is small, dear, especially at the top. We've served on competition juries together for years." The professor sipped her coffee. "She asked for my thoughts on the arrangement. Specifically, whether our conservatory would be willing to coordinate with Paris on a specialized curriculum." Sophia's heart beat faster. "And what did you say?" "I said it was an extraordinary opportunity that would require extraordinary commitment." The professor's voice grew serious. "Sophia, do you understand what's being offered to you? This isn't just about lessons anymore. This is professional training at the highest level." Sophia nodded slowly. "I think I do. But I'm scared?" "Good," Professor Torres said firmly. "You should be. Fear keeps us honest." She reached across the table to take Sophia's hand. "But fear shouldn't stop you. Not when you have a gift like yours." After the professor left, promising to begin arrangements if Sophia decided to accept the offer, the family sat in thoughtful silence. "We need to talk about the practical side of this," Carlos finally said. "Paris is expensive. Even with a scholarship, there would be travel costs, accommodations." "I could get more hours at the bakery," Elena suggested, "and Sophia could continue her weekend performances at the restaurant." "No," Carlos said firmly. "If she does this, she needs to focus completely on her studies. No distractions." They talked in circles for hours, weighing options, calculating costs, making plans only to abandon them when new obstacles arose. Through it all, Sophia remained largely quiet, listening to her parents try to reshape their lives around her unexpected opportunity. That night, after her parents had gone to bed, Sophia sat alone at her piano in the darkness. She played softly, improvising a new piece that captured the swirling emotions of the past few days: hope and fear, opportunity and sacrifice. The music helped her think, helped her see pathways that weren't visible in conversation. By morning, she had made her decision. "I'm going to accept," she told her parents over breakfast, "but only if we find a way that doesn't put all the burden on you two." "What do you mean?" Elena asked. "Professor Torres said there's interest in my composition, maybe I could sell it." And Madame Rousseau mentioned recording executives. "I could make an album." Carlos sighed. "Sophia, these things take time. We need solutions now." "Then I'll call Maestro Volkov," Sophia said with sudden determination. "He must know about the financial side. Maybe there are patrons, foundations." To her parents' surprise, Sophia did exactly that, using the business card Volkov had given them. The conversation was brief and direct. When she hung up, her expression was unreadable. "Well," Helena prompted. "He said to be at the conservatory tomorrow at 10. He's flying in to meet with Professor Torres." Sophia paused, then added, "He said to bring my passport." "Your passport? Why?" Carlos asked. "He didn't explain. Just said I'd need it." The next morning found them in Professor Torres's office at the conservatory. Anton Volkov arrived precisely at 10, accompanied by a slender man in an immaculate suit who carried a leather portfolio. "Miss Mendez." Volkov acknowledged Sophia with a brief nod. "These are your parents?" After introductions, they all sat in the small office while Professor Torres explained the educational program that had been designed. Sophia would remain based in Madrid, studying piano with Professor Torres and composition with another faculty member. Once a month, she would travel to Paris for intensive sessions at the conservatory there. And twice monthly, Volkov himself would come to Madrid to work with her. Maestro Volkov has generously adjusted his performance schedule to accommodate these lessons, Professor Torres explained, unable to completely hide her amazement at this unprecedented arrangement. Throughout the explanation, the unknown man in the suit remained silent, occasionally making notes. Finally, Volkov gestured to him. "This is Mr. Laurent, my attorney," he said. "He has prepared some documents." Laurent opened his portfolio and began distributing papers. "This is a contractual scholarship arrangement," he explained in precise accented Spanish. "It covers all educational expenses at both institutions for 3 years, with an option to extend for 2 more. It includes a monthly stipend for living expenses and accommodations in Paris during Sophia's residency periods." Elena glanced at the stipend amount and gasped softly. It was more than she earned in 2 months at the bakery. Who is providing this funding?" Carlos asked, his voice tight with suspicion. "The Anton Volkov Foundation," Laurent replied smoothly. "The maestro established it 10 years ago to support exceptional musical talent." Sophia turned toward Volkov, her expression confused. "Why would you do this for me? You said my technique was elementary." "It is," Volkov replied bluntly, "but technique can be taught. What you have cannot." "And what's that?" Sophia asked. Volkov was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice had lost its usual sharpness. "Music is more than notes on a page or fingers on keys. It's a language for things that cannot be said. Some people study this language their entire lives and never become fluent." He paused. "You were born speaking it." The room fell silent. Coming from Anton Volkov, this was an extraordinary acknowledgement. "There are conditions," Laurent continued after a moment, bringing them back to the practicalities. "Sophia must maintain satisfactory progress in all areas of study. She must participate in specified performances and competitions. And most importantly, she must grant the foundation exclusive rights to record and publish her compositions for the duration of the scholarship, with royalties split 70-30 in her favor, 70% to Sophia," Carlos clarified, surprised by the generous terms. "Yes," Laurent confirmed. "The foundation's 30% will fund scholarships for future students." More discussion followed. Details about schedules, housing arrangements, travel logistics. Through it all, Sophia sat quietly, overwhelmed by the sudden transformation of her life from struggling student to sponsored prodigy. "Do you have questions, Miss Mendez?" Volkov eventually asked, noticing her silence. Sophia nodded slowly. "Just one. What happens if I fail? If I can't meet your expectations?" Volkov regarded her thoughtfully. "Do you remember what you told me when I asked how you compose?" "I said I play what I hear in my head." "Yes. And I believe what you hear in your head has value, whether or not you become the next Mozart." He leaned forward slightly. "I am not investing in what you might become, Miss Mendez. I am investing in what you already are." With those words, something tight in Sophia's chest loosened. She nodded, her decision made. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind. Papers were signed, schedules arranged, special accommodations for Sophia's blindness put in place at both institutions. The practical challenges were enormous, but with Volkov's resources behind them, solutions appeared almost magically. Sophia began her new educational program immediately. The intensity was unlike anything she had experienced before. Professor Torres pushed her technique to new levels, demanding precision and control Sophia hadn't known she was capable of. Her composition instructor, a gentleman with exacting standards, helped her develop systems to capture the music in her head, using recording technology, special notation software, and a musical assistant who could transcribe what she played. Volkov's bi-monthly lessons were something else entirely. He would arrive unannounced, sometimes at the conservatory, sometimes at Sophia's home, demanding to hear her progress. His criticism remained sharp, but now it was focused and constructive rather than dismissive. And occasionally, very occasionally, he would offer a word of praise that Sophia treasured like a rare gem. 1 month into her new studies, Sophia traveled to Paris for the first time. Elena accompanied her, both of them wide-eyed at the grandeur of the Paris Conservatory. During her week there, Sophia worked with 5 different instructors, each focused on a specific aspect of her musical development. She met other students, some friendly, others coolly competitive, all extraordinarily talented. Back in Madrid, Sofia found her old life transforming. Their apartment building buzzed with the news that Sofia Mendez was now studying with the great Anton Volkov. Neighbors who had barely noticed the blind girl before now stopped Elena in the hallway to ask about Sofia's progress. The local newspaper ran a small article about her, featuring a photograph taken at the Barcelona festival. Late one evening, after a particularly grueling day of practice, Sofia sat with her parents in their tiny living room. "Are you happy with your decision?" Carlos asked her. Sofia considered the question carefully. "It's harder than I imagined. Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning in new information, new expectations. Volkov pushes me until I want to scream." "If it's too much," Elena began, worried. "No," Sofia interrupted. "That's not what I'm saying." She smiled, her face lighting up in a way her parents hadn't seen in weeks. "For the first time in my life, I'm being challenged to use everything I have. It's exhausting and frightening and wonderful." Carlos squeezed her hand. "I'm proud of you, Sofia. Not because you impressed Anton Volkov or because you might become famous someday. I'm proud because when opportunity knocked, you had the courage to open the door." Sofia leaned her head against her father's shoulder. "The door is open," she agreed. "Now I just have to be brave enough to walk through it." In her mind, she was already composing a new piece, one that captured this moment of standing on the threshold between her old life and whatever lay ahead. The music flowed through her thoughts, no longer trapped inside but ready to be shared with the world. 3 years passed in a blur of lessons, practice sessions, and performances. Sofia's life transformed completely from the quiet existence she had known in Madrid to one filled with constant challenge and growth. Her small world expanded across borders as she divided her time between Spain and France, between being a student and becoming an artist. On a crisp autumn morning, Sofia sat in a recording studio in Paris, her fingers poised above the keys of a magnificent concert grand piano. It was her 21st birthday, and she was recording her first album, a collection of her own compositions alongside interpretations of classical pieces that had shaped her musical journey. "Ready when you are, Sofia," came the voice of the sound engineer through her headphones. Sofia took a deep breath and began to play. The piece was her own, the very composition she had performed that day in Barcelona when Volkov had dismissed her, only to be silenced by her playing. Over the years, she had refined it, expanded it, given it structure while preserving the raw emotion that had flowed through her fingers on that life-changing day. In the control room, Elena and Carlos watched their daughter through the glass, still amazed at how far she had come. Beside them sat Anton Volkov, his face impassive as always, but his eyes never leaving Sofia as she played. When she finished, there was a moment of reverent silence before the sound engineer spoke again. "That was perfect," he said, his voice slightly unsteady. "I don't think we need another take." Sofia smiled, a quiet confidence in her expression that had developed over years of rigorous training. "Let me listen to it first," she said. "There's a passage in the middle that didn't feel quite right." The engineer played back the recording. Sofia listened intently, her head tilted slightly, her fingers moving unconsciously in her lap as if still playing. When it finished, she nodded. "You're right," she conceded. "It's good. We can move on to the Chopin." As she prepared for the next piece, Volkov turned to her parents. 3 years ago, she would have insisted on 20 more takes, he observed. "She's learned to trust her instincts." "You've been a hard teacher," Carlos said. Not accusingly, but as a statement of fact. "She's been a harder student," Volkov replied with the ghost of a smile. "Stubborn, questioning, never satisfied," he paused. Exactly what a true artist should be. The recording session continued throughout the day. By evening, Sofia was exhausted but exhilarated. The album was nearly complete. Just 2 more days of recording remained. Afterward would come her first international tour, 12 cities across Europe, culminating in a special performance at the Palau de la Música in Barcelona, returning to where it all began. That night, Sofia's parents hosted a small birthday dinner in the apartment the Volkov Foundation had provided for their Paris stays. Professor Torres had flown in from Madrid. Madame Rousseau attended with her husband. A few of Sofia's classmates from the Paris Conservatory joined them, along with her composition teacher. Volkov made a brief appearance, uncomfortable as always in social settings, but determined to acknowledge the milestone. As they ate and talked, sharing stories and laughter, Sophia found herself overwhelmed with gratitude. The blind girl from a poor neighborhood in Madrid now sat at a table with some of the most respected names in classical music, not as a charity case or curiosity, but as a colleague, an equal. When the cake was brought out, Elena had insisted on baking it herself despite the availability of Paris's finest patisseries. Everyone sang "Happy Birthday." As Sophia blew out the candles, Professor Torres asked the question on everyone's mind. "What did you wish for, dear? Or is it bad luck to tell?" Sophia smiled. "I didn't wish for anything. Everything I once wished for has already come true." Later, as guests were leaving, Volkov approached Sophia privately. "I have something for you," he said, pressing a small package into her hands. "A birthday gift. Open it when you're alone." Sophia was surprised. Volkov had never given her a personal gift before. "Thank you, Maestro. Anton," he corrected her. "After 3 years, I think we can dispense with formalities." The next morning, Sophia remembered the gift. Sitting alone in her bedroom, she carefully unwrapped the package. Inside was a small flat object, a CD case. Her fingers explored it, finding a note attached in Braille. "I found this in my archives," the note read simply. "I thought you should have it." Curious, Sophia put the CD into her player. What she heard made her breath catch. It was piano music, a child playing Mozart with technical precision but little emotion. As the piece progressed, the playing improved dramatically, emotion beginning to flow through the notes. Then came a voice she recognized as a much younger Volkov. "Better, Anton. Now play it again, and this time remember what we discussed about the phrasing." The child began again, and suddenly Sophia understood. This was Volkov himself as a boy, recorded during a lesson with his teacher. She listened to the entire CD, nearly an hour of a young Volkov struggling, improving, being corrected, trying again. It was intimate, vulnerable, a side of her stern teacher she had never imagined existed. When the recording ended, Sophia sat in silence, processing this unexpected gift. Volkov had shown her that even he, the great seemingly infallible maestro, had once been a student making mistakes, learning, growing. It was perhaps the most personal thing he could have shared with her. 2 months later, Sophia stood backstage at the Palau de la Música in Barcelona. Her tour had been a triumph. Glowing reviews, sold-out concerts, standing ovations in every city. Her album had been released to critical acclaim, with music journalists marveling at the depth and maturity of her compositions. Now she had come full circle, returning to the place where her journey had begun. The hall was packed, not with skeptical critics this time, but with eager fans who had traveled from across Spain and beyond to hear her play. As she waited for her cue to walk on stage, Sophia felt a familiar presence beside her. "Nervous?" Volkov asked. "A little," she admitted. "It's strange being back here. I keep thinking about that day." "Don't," Volkov advised. "That was a different Sophia. A different Volkov, too, if I'm honest." Sophia smiled. "You were horrible to me." "I was," he agreed without apology. "And you proved me wrong in the most spectacular way possible." He paused. "Few people have ever done that." "I didn't set out to prove you wrong," Sophia said. "I just played what I felt. And that's why you succeeded. Because you were authentic when everyone else was trying to impress me." Volkov straightened her already impeccable collar. "Now go out there and be authentic again." Sophia nodded, unfolding her white cane. Although she now knew the layout of most concert halls by heart, she still used the cane as a reminder to herself and to the audience. Her blindness wasn't something to hide or overcome. It was simply part of who she was. The stage manager approached. 2 minutes, Miss Mendez." In the front row of the audience, Carlos and Elena waited nervously. Beside them sat Professor Torres, Madame Rousseau, and several of Sophia's teachers and classmates who had come to witness this homecoming. The hall hummed with anticipation. When Sophia walked onto the stage, the audience erupted in applause. She bowed gracefully, then made her way to the piano, the same Steinway she had played 3 years earlier. As she settled onto the bench, she allowed herself one deep breath, one moment to marvel at the journey that had brought her back to this spot. The program began with Bach, moved through Chopin and Rachmaninoff, and concluded with her own compositions. Each piece showcased not only her technical growth but the emotional depth that had always been her greatest strength. The audience listened in rapt attention, many moved to tears by the beauty and power of her playing. For her final piece, Sophia had chosen a new composition, one she had written specifically for this concert. It began with a simple, questioning melody that echoed the piece she had played for Volkov 3 years ago. But from that familiar seed grew something entirely new, a complex, joyful celebration of transformation and possibility. As her fingers danced across the keys, Sophia thought about all the people who had made this moment possible. Her parents who had sacrificed everything to support her dream, Professor Torres who had recognized her potential, Madame Rousseau who had opened doors, her teachers and classmates who had challenged and encouraged her, and Volkov, the man who had humiliated her, then championed her, pushing her beyond what she thought possible. The final notes of her piece rang through the hall, hanging in the air like a question answered. When Sophia lifted her hands from the keys, there was a moment of absolute silence. That magical pause when an audience is so moved they forget to applaud. Then came a sound Sophia would never forget, the thunderous roar of a standing ovation that seemed to shake the very foundations of the Palau. People stamped their feet and shouted, "Brava!" Flowers were thrown onto the stage. Sophia stood and bowed, tears streaming down her face. In that moment, she understood something profound. Music had never been about proving herself to others or overcoming her blindness. It had been about finding her authentic voice and sharing it with the world. As the applause continued, Sophia thought about the young girl she had been, sitting alone at a second-hand piano in a tiny Madrid apartment, playing by ear, dreaming impossible dreams. That girl could never have imagined this moment, this life. But somehow, note by note, she had found her way here. Sophia bowed one final time, her heart full. The journey hadn't ended. In many ways, it was just beginning. But whatever came next, she would face it with the same courage and authenticity that had brought her to this triumphant night. And somewhere in the back of the hall, Anton Volkov stood watching, a rare smile on his face, as the blind girl who had once dazed him with her playing now dazed the whole world.